Good evening. I have with me India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman in a first media interaction to a private channel. Nirmala ji, thank you so much for giving us this exclusive interview. Once again, the first to Network 18. I would like to begin my first question, and I'd like to frame it in the context of the last 3 years. In the September of 2019, you did a deep corporate tax cut, setting the agenda for growth, if I may. The same year, you delivered a growth-oriented budget. You repeated a very good growth-oriented budget even last year. This year, everyone was expecting you to deliver a populist budget ahead of the 5 states going into election. What was going on in your mind this year when you were framing this budget?
Thanks for giving me this opportunity to explain a bit more about the budget. I think in the mind of the Prime Minister, there was never this doubt that this budget, drawing from certain policy prescriptions that we had laid out in the last, for an economy which is coming out of the pandemic and showing very good positive revival signs, we should unhesitatingly give more help and stimulus that is required so that the revival is sustainable and the revival is strong. And therefore, there was no doubt in our minds from the very initial stages of working on this budget that public investment in infrastructure, that is the capital expenditure for the government, should be kept up. Even last year, we had given a good solid increase in the capital expenditure of the government between 2021 and 21-22. Now this year, therefore, we wanted to continue that momentum and also take as much as it is required to help the states to also move forward with their infrastructure spending. So from the beginning, I think the clarity in the mind of the Prime Minister was growth. Growth has to be ensured, growth has to be sustained, and we have to lead it, because only by public expenditure on infrastructure building, we believe that the virtuous cycle will happen, and also there will be a crowding in effect for the private investments to come in. So there was never a doubt other than this.
The elections were not weighing on your mind?
No, actually, we thought if the economy does well and if growth has attained that kind of a momentum, the multiplier effect, which because when you spend on infrastructure and when you do capital expenditure, for every rupee that you spend, approximately 2.95 is what you would get as a multiplier, as opposed to when you're giving money through revenue expenditure, you get less than 1 rupee for every rupee that you spend, something in the range of 0.95 or something. And therefore, we thought it was important to have maximum multiplier effect, and that would have enough ripple in the economy, whereby the well-being of the citizens will be attended to. So if that is happening, why would any other consideration come in, even with the elections on? Elections come and go, but the economy, particularly at this time, at this juncture, requires that strong support.
Nirmala ji, if you look at India, it is one of the bright spots in the global economy.
That's
Today,
right.
Our economy is expected to grow at 8.5% next year. The same number for China is 4.8%, Brazil 1.6%, Indonesia 5.6%. Do you think that an 8% plus kind of growth is sustainable over the next few years?
If things go the way they are going now, in that gradually all sectors come up and are on their toes. And why do I say this? I recognize that even now the hospitality and contact intensive sectors are still requiring support, and that's been provided for in the budget. So our understanding is, if even those sectors revive as much as they would like to, and with support from government and with support from the systems, banking and others, yes, that is achievable.
You know, this time, one big headline of your budget has been this big capex boost. You also referred to it just a little while ago. Allocation of 7.5 lakh crore. Right. You know, that's a big number, up 35% from last year. Do you think that this will fire up private investments? If that happens, you know, it could change the face of the economy. Are you confident of that?
I'm hopeful of that, because you see, I'm looking at it from slightly different stages and also environments. In 2019, for instance, when we brought in the reduction in the corporate tax and brought it down to such level which was globally probably the lowest, or probably one of the few lowest rates, we that year were sort of reminded, saying your corporate tax revenues have gone down, you saw it's not going to help, and so on. But we had this great faith, and Prime Minister's interaction with the industry also was very reassuring, because people felt that that was a very positive, constructive steps. And what did it do? Actually, many of the industries, many of the big companies who actually generate wealth and create also jobs, so you saw them per media reports leveraging it, probably cleaning up their debts and so on. But that providentially has come of help during the pandemic time, that today you find many of them moving into areas of expanding their capacity. Mergers are happening, acquisitions are happening. You see that companies are out there to be able to expand their capacities, looking at the buoyant Indian market. And also exports are growing, which means export potential is also there for private sector investments to see the opportunity available, and expansion, and also newer capacities are definitely going to come in. The last point on that is, you also see, in spite of all the naysayers, FDI into this country, in spite of all the speculation about other central banking authorities taking different call, whether it is the Fed or anywhere else, FDIs are still coming into this country in a big way. They are not FPIs.
Yes.
FDIs come in to be invested in, to be on the boards of companies, and then take a call. And therefore, I think companies now are happy to be partnering with a lot of FDIs which are coming in, and increasing their manufacturing capacities, servicing capacities, not just to serve Indian market, but also be able to access global markets. And our PLI scheme also indicates that.
Yes. You know, Nirmala ji, if you look at the actual spending from capex allocation so far in the first 8 months of this year, it is at 50% of the allocation of 5.5 lakh crore. Now you increase that to 7.5 lakh crore next year. How confident are you that the spending will keep pace with the allocation?
First of all, this year has been, yes, we had made an allocation till December, you are right, 65 to 68% has been utilized by the departments for spending on public infrastructure. But after the budget was announced, let's not forget that we had Omicron, the second wave, not even Omicron, second wave in April. And although we came out of it, thank God for that, although we came out of it quickly, it also staggered that first quarter's expenditure into the second, into the third, and so on. So reaching 68 in spite of the first quarter going, April going in, April and a bit of May going in because of the second wave and the psychological imprint it left on people, for us to catch up with the intended public expenditure did have a lag effect. So I would think that shouldn't be the case this coming year. now that Omicron also is showing signs of withdrawing. I don't want to say it's gone away, we'll have to be careful, but still.
Nirmala ji, you've addressed the supply side of the issue. I come to now the demand side. The big issue is how do we really revive demand? So you've got your large capital expenditure program chalked out. Could you have considered cutting taxes to put more money into the hands of the consumer?
There are ways in which demand creation can happen. In our country, where the taxpayers' number and also the taxpayers' profile is seen, then you also realize that it is possible to provide stability in tax regime, predictability in tax regime, and that I would think is a very important factor at a time like this. You don't want to bring in elements of uncertainty, and as a result of which some sections feeling, oh, all right, I've got some relief, but some other sections feeling that hadn't come to us. And probably this would have a bearing on many others. Any exemption given is also just not for those who desperately need it, but by law would be applicable for others who probably don't need it so much, but because the system and the framing is such that it'll benefit everybody. Yes. So that is one point. And second, if you're looking at tax stability, if you're looking at predictability and making sure that you have not increased anybody's burden, you're at least making sure that people who have planned their monies can be sure that that is remaining unaffected. Right. So we in this budget placed a lot of emphasis on stability and predictability. I'm no cricket watcher, but I would definitely say this from my outsider's understanding. Particularly in a T20 match, it will be the opening batsman can have the liberty to smash hit and do a lot of good sort of risk-taking batting. And probably the end overs, the fellows would have to catch up doing as much as they can because they'll have to meet the target and the gap which has to be filled. But there is a sweat toil happening which is in between the two. Yeah. You can probably take that situation.
I must say your cricket understanding is quite decent.
Thank you.
No, I think predictability, stability, I would even say continuity. I think that's been the hallmark of your last three budgets, as I have closely seen it. Right. Let me come to something that is a niggling issue, a global headache in some senses, inflation. Look at the US, for instance. Our consumer inflation has obviously stayed in the 4 to 6% range. But if that were to really go up in the coming years, do you think that could throw some kind of a spanner in the works?
I think globally all economies are worried about inflation. And that's not to say, okay, so what? Does it affect your planning or not? It does affect my planning. I'm only trying to say this inflation, particularly because of certain global factors of metals being very highly priced, energy, at least the fossil fuel being very expensive, the production being cut down, the cartel or cartelization of those who are fixing the prices, or all that is having a bearing on all over the world and certainly on us as well. Yes. And we also have realized that we are at a stage where we are making a transition towards climate